나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교. Okay, hello again, everyone. How are you today? I hope you're feeling well and you're in a safe place. Sifu Sylvain here with you. We're going to continue discussing and reading. And be quiet, computer. We're busy. And with the one of Nichiren's major writings, titled Selecting the Right Time. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, but certainly since we've done, what is this, seventh video on this particular Gosho, it's obvious he's Nichiren discussing the history of Buddhism, from Shakyamuni to Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Tendai, Dengyo, including himself, right? And he's now discussing the time period, so those 500-year time periods that Shakyamuni discussed. And now he's talking about the time period surrounding his own time, the time of the day of this writing. He's just getting to that. But I also want to call your attention to the way he discusses the capacity of the people, the audiences, for learning Buddhism, and the time periods reflecting not only time, but the development of consciousness, the mind, or perhaps even more to the point, the awareness of how influential the mind is in our experience of life, and conversely, the amount of influence that our actions, thoughts, words, deeds, everything we do affects that mind. That's a critical component that we need to consider when you and I are speaking to one another, or strangers, or new relationships forming. And that is how we can contemporize a lot of this information. Is very applicable to our own lives. And I can't not say, once again, a reminder that the way our actions influences our experience of life, our mind's perception of what we're experiencing, right? This is the definition of karma. Remember, we're all varied forms of energy in different states, or different states of energy in different form, however you want to say it. Energy, through formation, exhibits karma, right? Energy plus work equals karma. Because karma is the kinetics, the momentum of energies. And we are a vast cauldron of energies, aren't we? If you think of energies as happening in the subatomic world, the subparticle. What is a particle? A particle is a grouping of energy manifestations in that energy in different states of becoming, formation. Yeah, and this is what Buddhism points to directly from the get-go. It is those formations we need to tackle, to wrestle with, to influence rather than being influenced. It's no small task, especially when you consider how many of those formations and instantiations are going on in just one organism. Let alone the human body is a vast universe of activity constantly. So is everything we perceive as things. When we thingify, we abstract a permanence in things. I own this. I own that. I have this. I don't have that. I want that. I don't want to lose this. All that identification in our thingifying is an attempt in every level to define me. I am the sum of my possessions, whether they are physical things or states of thinking, states of being, states of influence, identification. And that, at its core, is where we create suffering. Worry about having, worry about losing, worry about amassing, worry about getting, worrying about what to do with. So if we can penetrate that thinking at the formation of thingifying, and we can understand, as Nagarjuna would say, what you're reaching out to possess is a flow of energy manifesting and residual and then decrepitude and evaporating. Because nothing that we consider to be static as it is actually exists. It's empty. It's like trying to grab a cloud. Well, a cloud is water vapor. Yeah, the scientists among you can pick apart my language. But conceptually understand that what I reach out to and grab the camera or this laptop or this microphone or my own nose is fundamentally an illusion, a delusion really, because I'm buying into this thing as being owned. From the perspective of ownership or having, that's the delusion. We just get to be with some energetic, kinetic phenomena, some manifestation that we can flow with, along with, beside which is by its very nature not permanent, not existing in the sense that there's no energy or molecule or atom called Sylvain or computer or camera. These are all manifestations of potentials in progress, in motion, in momentum. And we're moving along with them. I often use the analogy of picture in your mind, instead of every atom or particle that things are made of, instead of thinking there are particles of plastic and particles of glass and particles of microphones and on and on and on, in your mind, you now have the capacity to picture all of those things as photons, little quanta of light energy. And so you can see these beads or the furniture and the accoutrement behind me you could see them all in shapes defined by more or less photons of light. Think for a moment what that would look like. The science fiction movies used to do this kind of things. Remember Star Trek? The human beings standing in the transporter? And then with some neat little sound effects, all of a sudden, all of those human beings would turn into little speckles of light. And as soon as they became just white light outlines of humans, phoop, they disappeared. And phoop, they appeared somewhere else. So imagine everything looking like those little photons of light. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you imagine that? That there are no differences. That everything is just this variety of mass or collections of more or less light. And when you try to grab light, what happens? You can't. You can grab it in your mind as a function of experience. So if you can shift your mind to living as a human, bunch of light, interacting with other bunches of light, the stress about maintaining identity, it starts to melt away, doesn't it? The fear of losing or getting, well, it's everywhere, it's everything, it's all the time. There is no getting, there is no losing. This is just this big flow of collections of light. You begin to see the brilliance in this. No pun intended. or pun, who cares? The brilliance of light. Wow. But do you understand? This is what Buddhism is trying to talk about all the time. If you could understand, if you could operate your life, this samsaric life, on the basis of that, what do we call that? Equanimity. That everything you experience is just this process. And we can call this process life. We could call it a perceptive, named perceptive skill. Call it equanimity. But what we keep circling around is this idea is that the only reason there's any suffering in the world is this idea of identification with differences, when in fact the differences are the illusion. So that's how we're going to start our lecture today. Remember, I don't script any of this, so this is me with a lot of years of study and introspection and chanting, spontaneously experiencing with you these teachings. Oh, look at that. I didn't highlight that, but I know where we stopped. So this next section is the treatise on the aspiration for Buddhahood and Pukung's fallacies. So this is a transitional period in Japan. And he starts with a question. Toward the end of the Tang dynasty, this is China now, Tripitaka master Pukung, also Indian name Amogavara Vajra, brought from India to China a facile of tract entitled The Treatise on the Aspiration for Buddhahood. It is said to be a work of Bodhisattva Nagarjuna. According to Grand Master Kobo, it is the core of the 1,000 tracts written by Nagarjuna. What do you say about this? So, Nichiren, answering his own question, says, this tract, consisting of merely 7 written pages, includes many words which cannot have been taught by Nagarjuna. Catalogs of Buddhist scriptures cannot determine whether Nagarjuna or Pukung wrote it. We've talked about this before in the history of Nagarjuna, and in that playlist you'll find references to Pukung and this competing authenticity, authorship. It was not uncommon, and it's not uncommon today, for politicians or writers or opinion or editors or people who write books even to kind of invoke some kind of credential for their opinions vis-a-vis claiming it to be their espousing of some previous scholars or authors or successful persons' claims, and thereby adding some history, some lineage to a certain thought. They hope to inculcate some kind of respect for their opinion. What does that mean? I want to claim that the color yellow should be actually called brown. Well, you'll look at me and go, you dumbass, what are you talking about? Right? But if I say to you, I have unearthed Egyptian secrets from the great Pharaoh, that once this wonderful color was observed in nature from this powder of the petals of a flower known only to the Nile region. This color was declared to be the color brown, and it was only through some weird happenstance of history in medieval times when somebody misnamed it yellow, and we must go back to the true nature of this color as the color brown and just make my argument hugely dependent on this history and scholarship, and it's all fake. But suddenly, because I have all of this scholarship and all of this seeming proof, some of you will say, well, that's funny. It's really brown. I'm going to start calling things like bananas and stuff. Obviously, it's brown. Look at how yellow banana turned brown. Well, they're brown to begin with. How silly of us to have ever called that yellow. Look, this guy knows. He has the scholarship to back it up. He's not inventing it. This has been the manipulation. This is the world of anger, by the way. This manipulation of others in order to what? Garner favor, garner fame, garner respect, garner money, land, gifts. Look how special I am. When all the while, just lying through their teeth, creating this fake scholarship so they can make their claim to supremacy, to the one, whatever. Yeah? So, it's nothing new. It's nothing unfamiliar to human audiences. And yet, fall for it every day. Besides, this is not a summary of all the sutras preached by the Buddha during his lifetime. It may seem that way, but we're talking about time periods. So let's stick to the subject at hand, okay? And it often lacks accuracy. First of all, its main point, insisting that one cannot attain Buddhahood with his present body except through Shingon Buddhism, is simply not true. That's one of those made-up facts. Where the hell did you get that? It denies the possibility of becoming a Buddha with one's present body. Well, I mean, all you have to do is read a few sutras and you'll understand that everything Shakyamuni talked about, or any real scholarship talked about, is attaining the three bodies of Buddha. Bodies in mind, bodies in experience, and bodies in physical form. All three together are the body of Buddha. You can't experience body without having a body to experience with. And that experience is what is our reward, our experience itself. Those are the three bodies. And that's where Buddhahood is. That's what it is the full expression of those three bodies in the one when we invoke Buddha. So, what do you mean you can't? See, this goes back to that endless magic of human control over others, is that the glory of life will be something you experience when you don't have it anymore. When you're dead and gone, I'll show you where you can go and experience a good time, where everything is wonderful. And I'm the only one who knows that, so you have to follow me. Pay respects to me. Give me stuff, and I'll help you get there. What a ruse. You would think in this is 2022 now, you would think by this time in human development and history, we're walking around with massive computers in our pockets to make phone calls and play games and so on and so forth. But we still haven't figured out what an infantile ruse that is. It's amazing to me. Obviously amazing to Nichiren as well. He goes on, it denies the possibility of becoming a Buddha with one's present body as preached in the Lotus Sutra, which has both scriptural proof and factual proof, while insisting that becoming a Buddha with one's present body is possible in Shingon Sutras, though they have neither scriptural nor factual proof. It's just this guy's saying this in the middle of what? He's hoping that by saying something shocking, that will give him credence, credibility, authority. What the heck is going on? This is the prime mistake. I believe it is an arbitrary work of Tripitaka master Pu Kung, claimed to have been written by Nagarjuna for the purpose of greater credibility. Aha! Duh! There it is. Moreover, Tripitaka master Pu Kung's works have many mistakes. He's kind to call them mistakes, isn't he? Calling the Buddha who was revealed in the lifespan chapter of the Buddha, chapter 16 of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha of infinite life, as he does in his esoteric rites based on the Lotus Sutra, was apparently a blunder. It is not worthy of discussion that he mixed up the arrangement of the chapters of the Lotus Sutra by placing the Dharani, 26th chapter, next to the divine powers of the Buddha, 21st chapter, and moving the transmission, 22nd chapter, to the end. On the other hand, through plagiarizing the Mahayana precepts of Tendai, he received an imperial decree from Tsung Tai Tsung to establish the Mahayana precept dais at his 5 temples on Mount Wutai. He also insisted on adopting the Tendai doctrine to establish the doctrine of Chenyin Shingon Buddhism. Thus, he blundered much. Oh, Nichiren. Never without a tongue-in-cheek moment. Oh, what the heck was that? Sutras and treaties, he continues, translated by anyone but Pu Kung, must be depended on sometimes, but this man's translation cannot be trusted. There were altogether 187 men, old and new, who transmitted and translated Buddhist scriptures from India to China. All except one, Tripitaka Master Kumarajiva, committed errors. Tripitaka Master Pukung especially erred much. Besides, he apparently had false ideas. Okay, now we're getting to the matter. It's not just that he was a screw-up. It's that he had his own ideas he was pushing. So why are you paying attention to this guy? Question. How do you know all that? Except Tripitaka Master Kumarajiva erred in translating Buddhist scriptures. Are you not only trying to destroy the 7 schools of Buddhism, such as Zen, Pure Land, and Shingon, but also discrediting all translators who transmitted Buddhism to China and Japan? Is that what you're doing, Nichiren? Answer. This is something I consider quite confidential. You may ask me for details later. However, let me explain briefly now. Tripitaka Master Kumarajiva used to say from his own pulpit, quote, all the scriptures of Buddhism in Chinese do not represent the true meaning of the original Sanskrit. Hoping to reveal this, I have made a great vow. Quote, I have made my body impure by getting married, but as far as my tongue is concerned, I will keep it pure and refrain from speaking falsely on Buddhism. You know where this is going, right? You must remember this. It continues, to prove it, cremate my body after my death. You remember now? If my tongue burns together with my body, you should consider my translations of Scripture as false and discard them all. This is quite a vow, right? And as you know, the story goes on to say that, no, his tongue did not burn along with his body. This is that hyperbole that we read in Buddhist scriptures from day one, right? So, Nichiren continues, therefore, everybody from the emperor down to the populace wished to live long enough to see the death of Tripitaka Master Kumarajiva. I want to see if his tongue burns up, right? Later, when he died and was cremated, his impure corpse all became ashes, but his tongue alone remained unburnt on the blue lotus that appeared in the fire. Radiating rays of 5 colors, it shone so brightly that the night looked as bright as the day, and even the sun in the day paled in comparison. That's bright. As a result, estimation of the sutras translated by all other masters began to decline, while those translated by Kumarajiva, especially the Lotus Sutra, began to spread quickly in China. So, whatever that story's worth in hyperbole, it's a strong indicator that historically Kumarajiva's scholarship was above reproach. And where there were competing ideologies and translations of certain documents, Kumarajiva's always bore out consistency and reliability in the scholarship of Buddhism, whereas false and misleading statements were found constantly in other translators. That's a significant thing. Question. You may be right about translators before the time of Kumarajiva, but how about those after him, such as Subharakarashima and Pukung? Here comes Pukung again, because there are a lot of traditional schools of Buddhism at the time in Japan that rely on scholarship that comes based on the delusions of Pukung. And again, simply because it's so many hundreds of years old and from another country, for some reason that holds some burden of proof, of credential. Nichiren's already tossed all of that out the window, but there are those who will continue to say, well, okay, fine, Pukung was a liar, but look at my teacher, learned from his teacher, his teacher, his teacher, from based on what Pukung said, and how can that be false? Are you not paying attention? Anyway. Answer. Even after him, it remained the same. If a translator's tongue does not remain unburnt after the cremation of his corpse, you should know that his translations are false. In other words, whatever metric we use to broadly consider the statements of an individual, if they don't fit from beginning to end, remember consistency from beginning to end, if they don't tell the whole picture, if they deviate from what is obviously the corpus of the teachings, then you can't assign any credibility to them. In other words, if they're based on lies, then they're not worth the paper they're written on. This is the reason why Grandmaster Dengyo attacked the Hoso Dharma Characteristics school spreading in Japan, saying, quote, Tripitaka Master Kumarajiva's tongue remained unburnt, while those of Su Chang and Su En, who had translated Hoso canons, were burnt. Accepting this to be reasonable, Emperor Kamu converted to the Tendai Lotus school. It is predicted in the Nirvana Sutra, in such fallacies as the third and ninth, that in the process of transmission from India to foreign lands, Buddhism would beget many misinterpretations. And as a result, few people would be able to attain Buddhahood. Therefore, Grandmaster Miao Lo says, quote, whether or not there are mistakes in Buddhist scriptures, it all depends on translators. It has nothing to do with the Buddha himself. Right? And again, this is the nature of the scholarship I'm describing. Because there's a mistake, that doesn't mean Buddhism is in error. It means that the person making the mistake is in error. He means that no matter how hard people today try to attain Buddhahood according to sutras, they would be unable to do so if the sutras are false, and that they can't blame the Buddha for it. In studying Buddhism, besides knowing the differences between Mahayana, Hinayana, provisional, real, exoteric, esoteric teachings, one must first of all know whether or not scriptures are correctly translated. Man, it's really... I hear that in there. I have several thoughts. Number one, how gratifying, how absolutely verifying is that last sentence to our effort here, to our effort with the Quantum Life Buddhist School, to study all of Buddhism, certainly through our mentor Nichiren and his scholarship, but with his lens of scholarship to understand Dengyo, Mialo, Tendai, Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, and ultimately Shakyamuni. Everything Nichiren teaches is about Shakyamuni's Buddhism. How to read it accurately, how to understand it accurately, how to incorporate it in our immediate time space, into our lives, how to actualize his teaching. That's why we practice Lotus Sutra Buddhism. It is Shakyamuni's method of self-realization. That's what we practice. Our mentor, our bodhisattva, current to our epoch, is Nichiren. We don't practice Nichiren's Buddhism. Nichiren's Buddhism is Shakyamuni's Buddhism. Makes sense, right? Now we're going to the next chapter. I keep feeling neuropathy is a weird thing. I'll just say that. Grandmaster Tendai in the age of the semblance Dharma. So now we're going to spend a little more time in China. You must be by now, as we read this Gosho, quite impressed with Nichiren's corpus of knowledge, his study throughout his lifetime. His aha moments, right, of absolute clarity. The more you study, as Shakyamuni told us to, if you study Buddhism broadly, the truth will out. It will make its way through, even through posers and liars and egos and misinterpretations. If you read enough, you'll keep coming back to core concepts that they'll just line up. And the stuff that doesn't is easily eschewed. But if you don't do that, if you just study one little portion, then that's all you know. It's easy to be misled. It's just like anything else in life, yeah? Question. Same format. I do not fully agree with your view that those commentators in the 1,000 years age of the true Dharma propagated only provisional Mahayana teachings while knowing the true teaching of the Lotus Sutra was superior to all other sutras, exoteric as well as esoteric. However, I think I'm beginning to understand you. This questioner proposed by Nichiren is somebody who still is grappling with the idea that if Shakyamuni taught the Lotus Sutra when he was alive, then how is it that anyone practiced Buddhism afterward, after his passing, that didn't practice the Lotus Sutra? This is the benefit of ignorance, is you don't understand the time. You don't understand the way this was verbally transmitted. And this is why we talk about the 84,000 documents of Buddhism. Not because there are 84,000 exactly, but because this is a really huge number. Understand that it takes time to review and translate these verbal, oral teachings and memorize them and spread them through time. Right? It takes a while to memorize a song correctly. It takes repetition. It takes time. And if you have a song corpus of 84,000 songs, how much time will it take to spread the correct singing of that same song throughout time and people, let alone understand the meaning of those songs? A good long time, right? So the question continues. In the middle of the 1,000-year age of the semblance Dharma, Grandmaster Tendai appeared to write the 10-faciled profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra, exhaustively explaining the 5 characters of Miao, Fa, Yen, Hua, and Qing in 1,000 written pages. He also wrote the 10-faciled words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra in 1,000 written pages, interpreting each word and phrase of the Lotus Sutra, beginning with the opening phrase, quote, "Thus I heard," to the closing words, quote, "They bowed to him and retired," end quote, using 4 guidelines of causes and effects, inen, correlated doctrines, yakkyao, theoretical and essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra, honjaku, and spiritual contemplation, kanjin. In writing these 2 works in 20 facils, Grandmaster Tendai likened the relationship between the Lotus Sutra and all other Buddhist scriptures to that between the ocean and rivers, right? You remember we talked about that. He stated that as all rivers flow into the ocean, the teachings of the Buddha in all the Dharma worlds in the universe, without exception, lead to the lotus. The Grand Master, moreover, adopted interpretations by great Indian commentators, all without exception, into the Lotus Sutra. As for the interpretations by the 10 masters in northern and southern China, he refuted or adopted what he should, establishing the doctrines of the 5 periods and 8 teachings to classify all the scriptures of Buddhism under the Lotus Sutra. The Grand Master further wrote the 10 faciled Great Concentration and Insight, recapitulating in one moment of thought the whole teaching of the lifetime of the Buddha, and classifying all creatures in the 10 realms, from the Buddha land on top to hell at the bottom, into 3,000 categories. His writing style is superior to those of commentators far away in India in the past 1,000 years, to say nothing of those masters nearby in China during the past 500 years. Therefore, Grand Master Chia Shang of the Sanlun school, together with more than 100 leaders and elders of northern and southern China, requested Grand Master Tendai to lecture, saying, quote, "It is said that a sage appears in 1,000 years and a wise man in 500 years. It has come true today in the persons of the wise sage Nanhui and the great philosopher Tendai. In the past lives, they upheld the Lotus Sutra physically, verbally, and mentally, and in this life have they been the master and his disciple transmitting the sutra. Not only have they spread this teaching as sweet as nectar in the land of China, but also their fame has reached as far as India. Having natural ability to master the profound teaching of the Buddha, they are incomparably superior in lecturing on Buddhist scriptures to anyone since the time of Wei and Qin. This is the reason why I, together with some 100 monks who practice meditation, would like to request Grand Master Tendai to lecture on the Lotus Sutra." Precept Master Tao Xun of Mount Kungnan praised Grand Master Tendai in these words. Another quotation from this question, which is lengthy. "His understanding of the Lotus Sutra is as penetrating as the sun at high noon shining on the bottom of deep valleys. He preaches Mahayana Sutras like strong winds blowing in the great sky. Even if 10 million scholars of letters tried to learn his eloquence, no one would be able to master it. His lectures are like a finger pointing to the moon. Without sticking to the text, he freely expounds the Dharma, always pointing to the truth of the Lotus Sutra." Again with the finger and moon thing. Now, monk Fatsang of the Huayan Flower Garland School admired Grand Master Tendai, praising, quote, "Men like Nanhui and Tendai are extraordinary. Their minds naturally penetrate the truth, and they conduct themselves as bodhisattvas. They listened to Shakyamuni preach on Mount Sacred Eagle in the past and still remember what they heard then," end quote. And of course, this is that form of discussing from expedient means. Obviously, what this means is they had penetrating wisdom when they read the Lotus Sutra, the ceremony in the sky, and understood profoundly the meaning of that sermon. That's what that means. It goes on, there is a story in the biographies of Buddhist patriarchs of Sung that Tripitaka Master Pukung, there he is again, and his disciple, priest or monk Han Quan of the Chen Yen school, deserted their school to surrender to Grand Master Tendai. It says that when priest Han Quan accompanied his master to India, a priest said to him, quote, "I heard that Tendai is in China teaches superbly, differentiating true Buddhism from false and judging the comparative superiority of Buddhist sutras. Is it not possible for you to translate and transmit this to India?" This is what Grandmaster Miao Lo heard from Han Kuang. Hearing this, Grandmaster Miao wondered and recorded in his annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, quote, "Does this not mean that Buddhism has been lost in India and that the people in India are trying to find it in lands in the four directions?" Interesting, yeah? Yet very few people in China knew about Tendai, just as very few people in the state of Lu knew about Confucius. If there had been in India such great commentaries as Tendai's 30-facile profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra, the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, and the great concentration and insight, how could it be that Indian priests wished to see the works of Tendai? Does this not mean the revelation of the true meaning of the Lotus Sutra was spreading all over the world in the age of the semblance Dharma? So again, this very elaborate, long question is trying to put it to Nichiren, and of course Nichiren is the one who composed the question, but it would be a question that you might hear in debate from these other schools. And so he knows that question is in the air, and he's writing this book to reach the elites and the government who might make such an argument. So he's going to address it. And here he goes. Grandmaster Tendai, for the first time in China, spread the perfect meditation and wisdom of the Lotus Sutra, supreme of all sutras preached by the Buddha during his lifetime. No commentators have ever propagated this sutra before, during the 1400 years after the death of the Buddha, that is, the 1,000-year age of the true Dharma and the first 400 years of the age of the semblance Dharma. Moreover, Grandmaster Tendai's fame has reached as far as India. It appears that the Lotus Sutra was widely propagated, but the Grandmaster did not establish the perfect and sudden precept deus. It will not do for Hinayana precepts to be side by side with the perfect meditation and wisdom of Mahayana Buddhism. It is just like an eclipse of the sun or the moon. Moreover, the time of Grandmaster Tendai was in what the Sutra of the Great Assembly called the period of quite wide reading and much hearing, learning and realization, right? That is the third 500-year period after the death of the Buddha. It was not yet the fifth 500-year period when the Lotus Sutra was predicted to spread widely. So, in other words, although that teaching has existed all along, even back to the day of Shakyamuni, it was not being propagated as the one vehicle method, except scholarly, to understand its meaning, but not able to be understood by the capacity of the people at the time. So these elevated teachings were shown to be the absolute scholarship of Shakyamuni Buddhism. But as far as applying their meaning and their teaching to the populace, it was kind of like unreachable. It was a metric to judge other teachings as to whether or not they aligned with the ultimate teaching, but not something attainable as a methodology for the minds of people at the time. Does that make sense? It would be like taking a time machine and going back thousands of years and trying to teach people some very, electronics. How to bring your phone to them and look what this does. It would all seem magical. They wouldn't be able to conceptualize it in their mind. Does that make sense? We're running out of time. So now the next step is Grandmaster Dengyo in the age of the semblance Dharma. So now we're getting closer again to Nichiren's day and Japan. And I think before we dive into that, I'm going to make that another video. Gosh, I wish I could just sit here and talk 24/7, no sleep, and just go through all of this teaching. But I think as much as I might enjoy doing that, I think it would be far too great an imposition on your time. So I'm going to take a pause there. I think there's plenty to chew on in that segment. And we'll continue in the next one. I hope you got some insights in this, some questions perhaps. Use the comments, talk amongst each other, talk to me directly, email me, let me know how you're doing. I'm so proud of your practice, that you're participating in these sessions. It's amazing. This is a critical part of your practice is study. This is how you will increase your aha moments for yourself. Increase your confidence, your conviction, your resolve. And with this kind of study, even if it doesn't all quite gel, when you take that ichinen, that will, that energy that you're using to investigate, and you turn and go to your butsudan, and you look directly at your mandala, Nichiren's inscribed mandala of Myoho Rengekyo, you'll snap to your Buddha-ness very quickly. Namo Myoho Rengekyo. And your life will follow. And you'll experience life differently. You'll constantly evolve. Oops, battery's running low. Sorry about that. Oh, and of course it runs away. All right, we're going to end on that. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.